A real crime. In a series of podcasts, I want you to travel down some lonely roads with me. These are the roads I traveled with families who never got to say goodbye to loved ones. These family members were fated to live the rest of their lives waiting and wondering. I will begin this series with unsolved murders, but I will also revisit cases that include arrests because aspects of the case are worth re-examining. I wrote these stories when I worked as a reporter for the Charleston Gazette. Thanks for joining me today. Last week, I began explaining that it's a real crime to pollute a federally protected stream. Many people live along Arbuckle Creek, and they hoped federal employees could clean it up. But sadly, many of those employees lied about what they were doing. Episode 36, More Liars. PCBs were found at a workplace in Minden, and the landowners were handed a multi-million-dollar bill for questionable cleanup work. The man in charge of the cleanup was unmasked as someone who lied about his credentials. A federal judge would soon learn that people who worked with Bob Karen knew he lied and tried to keep that knowledge a secret. One lawyer for the defense, John Tenney, argued in federal court that government lawyers were more concerned about protecting the image of the EPA and to protect its star employee and the man of the year who was a complete fraud. In time, another government lawyer, William Hutchins, admitted that they started referring to the Karen problem and tried to keep the matter secret. U.S. Attorney Jared Snyder even advised Karen not to answer questions about his background. Snyder said, "I told him, Karen, not to answer." Karen was named On-Scene Coordinator of the Year for his work with the EPA. The next day, he began his deposition that would show he had no college degrees. This deposition marked the end of his promising career. Landowners filed suit in federal court to protest a huge bill for the cleanup in Minden that they did not believe they owed. Independently, federal lawyers were on their way to discovering the truth about Karen too. Charles Hayden, an EPA lawyer, testified that he was checking credentials for all EPA employees who were asked to testify in court. Hayden said he tried to get the information from Karen several times, but Karen stalled him. As the clock ticked toward time for Karen's deposition, Hayden called the college himself. That's when Hayden learned that Karen was never a student at Drexel University and never had the 2 degrees he said he did. Fully knowing that their star witness was a liar, federal lawyers kept silent, and they still pressed the landowners to pay the cleanup bill. As they started to examine all aspects of the cleanup in Minden, lawyers noted that Karen tried to clean the toxic soil on site. He had a contractor build a full-scale treatment plant on site too, but once Karen realized his experiment was a failure, he ordered the company that built the on-site treatment plant to disassemble it and remove it. This alone cost the EPA and us, the taxpayers, $1.235 million. Once the landowners discovered that Karen did not have the credentials he said he had, one lawyer wrote, "The administrative record is unreliable, just as the person who was responsible for its preparation is unreliable. How could anyone trust Karen's assessments and calculations now that they knew he was not the person he swore under oath to be?" During his career, Karen took a break from the federal government and worked for a private company. He submitted a resume for this company, also claiming he had the 2 college degrees. As I mentioned, Karen's lies started to come to light when lawyers asked him about questions under oath. After Karen reviewed one deposition he gave, he removed and destroyed exhibits that related to his personnel file when he worked for a private company. Interestingly, Karen wrote on the transcript that he destroyed those materials upon advice of counsel. U.S. Attorney Jared Snyder later explained that he told Karen not to answer questions about his background. By the time I was covering this case in federal court, I already knew U.S. District Judge Elizabeth Hallinan. She was the embodiment of dignity and decorum. She was obviously well versed in law, and everything ran like clockwork in her courtroom. She also had some great assistants whom I always enjoyed working with. But this was my first time to meet John Tenney, a lawyer from Charleston. He too was the essence of dignity and decorum. His knowledge of law was voluminous. He was always extremely polite and well spoken. After the case, I interviewed him in his office. He told me he just smelled a rat. Then he knew Karen lied. After it was clear that Karen lied and federal lawyers helped him cover up those lies, lawyers for the landowners asked the judge to throw the whole case out. As she did with every case, she studied the issues carefully. The judge would learn that Snyder and his immediate supervisor knew that there was both a civil and a criminal investigation into Karen's background, but they did not tell the judge. The day came for all of us to assemble in her courtroom for her decision. To this day, I can still hear her voice say the words, "the duty of candor." In clear language, she let everyone know how disappointed she was that federal lawyers had knowingly allowed someone who did not tell the truth come into her courtroom. She also let the federal lawyers know the depth of her disappointment that they had discovered a liar and covered up. She continued, "The duty of candor is as priceless as it is ageless. Today we send a message to all counsel who appear before this court that the duty of candor will be upheld and preserved at all times, irrespective of the identity of the parties and the monetary stakes in litigation." She said everyone who comes to court has a duty to tell the truth, the duty of candor. Unless court officials always tell the truth, she pointed out, we would have no genuine system of justice. The judge has died, and I'm sure she would never understand the times we live in now as officials who swear to tell the truth do not. To punish the lawyers who allowed the deceit, she dismissed their entire case against the landowners. I wrote my first request for information under the Freedom of Information Act in this case. I tried to find out more about U.S. Attorney Snyder and his role in this case. I was amazed when I received my response in the mail. I cannot remember how many pages were mailed to me, but every single word on each page was blacked out with a thick magic marker. They responded to me promptly, as required by law, but there was not a single readable word in the response. When someone in an official capacity marks out words so that they cannot be read, we call that redacted. We're hearing that word frequently now as federal officials discuss redacting words in the affidavit for the search warrant for Donald Trump's Florida house. The words are not erased or removed from the official document. They are covered over so they cannot be read. For me, Judge Hallinan personified the truth, justice, and American way. I can only wish she had more followers today. Thanks, as always, for listening, to Tommy Siner for his always great work, and to Brenda Purnell for her amazing technical skills. Please join me next Wednesday for a new episode of A Real Crime by Susan Williams.